So I thought it'd be best if I do a demo of how I would paint a almost all white still life, like the ones I showed in the examples, to give you an idea of how I see it. As you'll see in my paintings, I usually go straight to paint, but in this one I thought it'd be good to show the example of what I would do if I did a small sketch first. So I did that rough sketch. It takes minutes to lay that down just to see where the objects fall. I'm not trying to do a finished drawing, just placement. And the reason I don't want to do a full blown out drawing, because then my painting becomes a coloring book where I'm trying to color within the lines. And I like a more painterly feel to my finished product. And one of the ways you can get a more painterly feel is by not being so locked into your original image. If you trust your drawing skills, that by putting down a few marks, you can always come in and correct and put the shapes. You're going to get a much more painterly feel than if you feel like you have to draw it perfectly and then color it. You can see here as I'm doing the picture, I want all the shapes to be touching each other. So I start with a color that, like at the top there, I wanted to get that bluish gray at the top to build the rest of my painting off. So if you want to start with a color either you can make, or a color that is an area that you want to base the painting off, either it's the lightest light, the most chroma, whatever it is you're picking, that will be your key color, key value to start with. So in this, as you saw, I started with the top. Now, when we talk about temperature, that local color of the picture that I worked on and this picture here, they're both white. One's more of a straight white, one's more of a off-white. But you can see in the shadow area, white isn't always white. And that's a big mistake we can make if we want to make a painting full of light and full of color, is by just darkening the shadow side of those shapes. It won't have the effect of light, because in the end, everything is a light source. Not only in this scene, the sun is my most powerful light source, but the orange that's being bounced in on the larger picture is a light source. The lemons are a light source. The ground covering is a light source. Everything is a light source into the other. There's just different degrees in strength. And you can see, even though this is speeded up, I'm working fairly quickly. I thought it would be more interesting to not worry about edges. I'm going for the shape, but they're not refined to the detail. I'm just worried about color and worrying about fitting puzzle pieces together, one piece to the next. You can't build a puzzle by taking one piece and then putting another in the other end of the puzzle. They have to fit. The shapes have to fit. And every piece that fits together helps tell me the next color, the next temperature, the next value. Now, this one, as you can see, is painted digitally, but we'll certainly be seeing demos in oil. So we're seeing the reflected light, and that's the warms bouncing into that picture. And then you have to see that the cast shadows on the ground, what is their main light source? Their main light source is going to be the sky. So they're going to lean blue. But as you can see, the temperature in the cast by this foreground picture that I'm working on right there is affected by the picture, the off-white picture there that I'm painting right now. So as you can see, they're all influencing each other. So those are not going as blue as the distant shadow behind everything on the white ground cloth. So just working that rim of that, I did that a few times, just trying to get the right width. And you'll find when you do the homework of working all white still life, you'll be amazed at the amount of color, especially if you work outside. And if you put things in the scene like this, I had some orange material just to the right to get some warmth in there to create some interest and go off that complement from the other colors within the scene. But I really look forward to everyone giving this a try. But I do recommend doing it from life if possible. If you can do it from life outside, that's probably the best. If you can do it from life inside, that's certainly going to work as well. If you can do an incredibly refined painting, that's great. But if you can just go as far as putting, like I said, shape next to shape next to shape and trying to make it look like something when you back up, just because your shapes are pretty close to correct and getting the right value and temperature, I think you can grow so much. I mean, so much instead of doing it just once. I mean, What if you did it 10 times, 20 times, and just keep refining this ability to mix color? And as you look at this, I think it's also interesting to note that nothing is white. If I was to take a white, straight white, and place it in this scene, I think you would see how much color there is in everything, because as I've mentioned, color lives in the middle. It doesn't live in the extremes. So if I go all the way to a black, the top left appears to almost go black. If I would have painted that top left triangle black, it would really kill the color in this, because you can see it has a color. It leans green. And my whites don't go straight white. You can see that some go more tan, yellow, violet. They all have that temperature. And so when I'm looking, I'm doing that comparison like I talked about in the different greens in the tropics and that banana plant, that I'm doing that comparison of how does this temperature compare to that temperature? How does it vary? Does it go warmer? Does it go cooler? And then I can do the same with value. Does it go lighter? Does it go darker? Now, one thing that's really nice about digital is that you can work light, dark, back and forth as much as you'd like. The canvas never fills so much that it can't take pigment anymore. But in oil, you have to be a little more thoughtful on the order how you're laying things down. So as I'm bringing this close to an end, take note of how things compare, how, especially on the picture, that I didn't have a soft transition. You know, if I was to really refine this, the shapes on the picture would have a soft transition, and everything's a little more sharp. As you can see, the cast shadow is not completely refined as well, but take note of how much of the story we can tell by just getting the correct value and the correct temperature. And if you can see it this way, one, it will grow how you see temperature. Sometimes when you approach working on an image, on a painting, you will feel, oh, I just have way too many things I have to think about. That is true. I've always said that painting is no concept I've ever learned in creating artwork is like rocket science. It's not a hard concept to understand. It's just that we're trying to remember so many things every time we make a decision. And a painting's full of millions of decisions. So I'm trying to reduce it to show that if we get the right value and temperature, look how far we can get before we even think about edges or anything else. If we start this by having a strong drawing foundation, then the sky's the limit. So as you're working around form and trying to decide where there is a variation in temperature, there's an important factor to consider, and that is every time there's a plane change, there's a temperature change. So as a cup or a vase or a lemon or a tree, whatever you're working on, a face, as a plane changes away from the light, it is going to get less influence from that light and more influence from other light sources, lesser light sources, or reflective light. So if you notice in this, the more colorful light is really bouncing in from the bounce light, or the reflective light, or the ambient light, which is the bluish coming from the sky. So notice if the plane is facing up, it's probably going cooler. If it's facing on the right side of this painting and it's facing right, it's going much warmer because it has that warm influence. If it's a plane facing the lemon, that plane is going to get more influenced by yellow. But a reflective light will never be more powerful than the direct light. So the sun wins in this particular scene, or your most powerful light will overpower every other light. So I do not have influence of the yellow of the lemon on the light side of my pitcher or cup or vase because it's being lit by the light, not being lit by the lemon. That's why you can make such a convincing image by just worrying about the planes and not the refinement of the edges. So we must understand planes as we understand temperature, because that's how we show form. I mentioned while I was doing the demo that I never go completely to white and never completely to black. So I thought it'd be good to pull up a couple values so you could see in the end. I put black up in the top corner to compare it to that green, and I put white down on the left to show even the highlight on the lemon and all the materials in that area never go to white. Remember, color lives in the middle, and if we pull our values to the extreme, it doesn't look as realistic because the range of our eye sees so much color, and when we go black, losing all temperature, or white losing all temperature, it doesn't feel like it lives in the same environment as everything bathed with the same kind of light, because all white will be bathed with a certain type of light which will give it a color. And all areas that go dark, the only areas that can go the darkest are areas that don't have direct light, ambient light, or reflected light going into it. So those can only be like a crevice or somewhere tucking in, and those even tend to go warm. So when we're painting, the question is, why do we paint from life? The big reason we paint from life is because a camera cannot interpret a scene as well as our eye. So when you look at a photo or paint from photos all the time, you're telling people what your opinion of a photo was instead of what your opinion of what life is. Because in the photo, a lot of the shadows will go black and some of the light areas will get blown out to white because a camera doesn't have that same range. So when we work from life, we'll tend to see more color and certainly harmonies that we would never imagine, that still have a unifying quality but are stretched to the limit in beautiful and interesting color.